Okay, pretty good morning. RCV ended up sending me my new axle shaft. It was a big surprise to me. They had told me 15 weeks. They sent me no shipping notifications of any sort, but happily I came home from work and there was the axle shaft. I had a rebuild kit and a brand new passenger axle shaft. So my friend Scott and I ended up assembling the stub shaft, the bell end to the axle shaft. Relatively easy job, 10-15 minutes. I had no problem with it whatsoever. Packed it all with RCV moly grease. And this morning, pulled the stock axle shaft out, this passenger axle shaft right here. So here's my original axle shafts with 25,000 miles on them. So they're safe and sound here for backup. You can see the unit bearing and the dust shield and so forth. So I'm going to be installing the new RCV passenger front axle shaft. There's my loyal companion watching me do the recent Jeep repair. So there it is. The new passenger side RCV axle shaft. Basically, you get this shaft right here. The stub shaft you reuse. You knock out the old cage and the splines and so forth. And there are 6 ball bearings, and you just line them up and you tap them in there. It's really easy. You do need to pay attention to the orientation of this metal cage. The curved end of it needs to face inboard that way. And then the inner piece that's splined has a really sharp bevel in it, and that bevel needs to be going outboard. And that's it. Put it all together with some RCV moly grease. Now I'm going to take this boot off, slide it down, place it in the knuckle, and then we'll begin the process of lining this up. I generally put a few tie wraps. You'll see that in the knuckle. It leaves a little air space. It's a pretty good trick. And then you need to re-skewer the orange boot and then get it to compress over the bell. All right, I just take the RCV moly grease and put it on the splines, and then I put it in the area there, so it's going to go through the inner axle seal. The boot goes in the knuckle like that. I'll line it up, and basically you skewer it and get it in there and get it started into the splines. And like I said, the only thing that's a pain in the neck is getting the boot to compress over the bell end. And one of the reasons is RCV gives you this tool, and I may be able to get it in there, but you have very little room when you run their RCV outer axle tube seals. Very, very little room. 1/16 of an inch maybe. So I just got to get everything all lined up. All right, with the tie wraps underneath the orange boot and using their little tool, you can see it kind of gets jammed in there. Now I'm going to take a pair of pliers and a screwdriver and knock that out. But I felt the bell end compress in, so I know I have it. I'm in the splines. I went through the inner axle seal, so now I just want to knock this out, and then I can check the fitment here and move this around, make sure everything's okay, and begin the process of putting the unit bearing back on. All right, as I said, I just used a plier and screwdriver. This thing was in there like that, kind of gets jammed in. I knocked it off. And then you can see now that I've seated the axle shaft all the way into the spline. So you see that when you run the RCV outer axle tube seal, you have no wiggle room there. This boot ends up coming right in line with the rubber channel in there, the seal itself. Nice. All right, I think we'll be ready for the unit bearing. Okay, this job is wrapping up. I got an upcoming trip, a nice wheeling trip coming up, and I got my OEM spare front axle shafts I'll take with me. And basically just put the axle shaft nut on right here, 100 foot-pounds. the unit bearing bolts, the 3 bolts, 75 foot-pounds. Next will be the caliper adapter bracket bolts. These bad boys get torqued to 120 foot-pounds. So we'll assemble that. We'll take it for a test drive. Then I'm going to, my steering wheel's a little off, maybe about 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch off. I'm going to adjust the drag link and take it for a little test drive. All right, I want to talk about this. This is a Rancho front rock glider. Now, I have mixed feelings about this. I run it in the front and the rear. And as you might remember, I busted the rear one at Ma Bell. 2 weeks later, on another rock ledge, I would put a vertical piece of ledge through the cast in my differential. And I had to weld it, and it was a big deal. However, I've decided now to actually run without the front Rancho rock glider. What happens is look at the fingers. As this thing gets hit, and it doesn't take much, it bends these fingers. There's bolts that 5/16 head bolts that go through here, and then it ends up bending the bolts. It can strip out the holes, then you got to retap them. So in the final analysis, I just said, hey, look, let's just stay with my Rancho armored diff cover. I don't have the 4 bolts that it came with originally. They kind of have a 5/16 small head with a flange, which is really nice because it fits into those recessed grooves there. But I did come up with some 5/16 head Allen cap screws, and those Allen cap screws do fit in there and stick out about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to put 4 of them in there. I Loctite mine. These things are constantly getting hit, and then I'm going to torque them to 25 foot-pounds. Now, one of the things about using Loctite is when you do get the bolts out, and they do get loose because, as I said, this thing takes such a beating. But then it's good to take a 5/16 bottoming tap and just clean out the thread. So that's all I'm doing right now. You can see that I've already installed the Allen cap screws. They're only sticking out about maybe 1/8 of an inch, which I'm pretty pleased with. There's 3 of them there, and the 4th one will be going in right here. And I'm just torquing them to 25 foot-pounds. You got to be careful with these things. All right, looking at these Allen cap screws, I actually really like them because I get a good size Allen wrench in there on the torque wrench. That's what the stock ones look like, and it's kind of half-assed. You got to find like a 5/16 tiny little socket to go in there. I actually like this. It's nice and beefy, and I was able to torque them good. So I'm happy to. I'm really happy about losing this rock glider. It was always getting loose. I'm constantly adjusting it. It's constantly bending the fingers, bending the bolts. So I'm hoping that this was a good move. I think it was. I greased the front end. She's all greased up. You can see over there the brand new RCV axle shaft, passenger side. Already took her for a test drive. It's perfect. So just taking care of some business here today.